Okay.
Hey guys, yeah, like Mr. Reiser said, the stuff's kind of dry, but it's really important though. It's on here saying about the ID, different types of metal, stuff like that, so we're going to kind of go over it real quick. The first time I learned this fact today, it was kind of interesting. This is hollow here. Does anybody know what type of metal that would be called? Anybody? What do you got, Dominic? Pipe. Okay, it's a pipe. What makes it a pipe, it was kind of cool. On all pipes, there's going to be a seam on it somewhere. What actually happened at the factory, this was actually rolled from a sheet of steel and then welded and basically ground at the same time to make the pipe. Now this one, it looks very similar, but it doesn't have a seam in it. That one's called a tube. That's the difference. A tube is actually formed from like a die. It's extruded through a die, so that was kind of interesting. Anyway, there's your first couple types of metals. We use those quite frequently for anything welding. Give me some examples. What kind of stuff can you build with a pipe? Ideas? Yep, table legs. A good advantage of this type of metal is the amount of stuff you can do with it. Because it's hollow, the advantage is, lighter weight, that kind of thing. To an extent, it's a little bit cheaper maybe because you're actually using less material. So that's one type. So let's see, we got pipe, we got tube, and let's see, anybody, this one's going to be kind of harder to draw. I want to take a guess at what that one is called. It makes a kind of a C shape or a U shape. It's a specific type of thing. We use it, we'll use it on a lot of different projects like a weight bench or tabletop as well. We can actually turn it upside down, and again, it's a lighter weight version of like a solid rod. But it's called a channel. Okay? This is called channel. Let's see. Real simple one. What do we call this one? What you got? Oh, this one is pretty simple, guys. Solid. Shaped kind of like a piece of candy. My hand. Like a chocolate bar. Okay. Okay, so that's this bar. And that comes in all shapes and sizes. Basically, when you're going to order stuff like this, it would come in a certain width, a certain thickness. And then with all this type of steel, when you order this type of steel, either online maybe or just through a steel supplier, most of this stuff is extruded, like I said, through a die, and it comes from the factory in a really long length, typically like 20 to 24 feet long. So, when you're actually calculating how much material you're going to need for your project, that's something to take into account. You might actually want to buddy up with someone else and say, all right, we both want to make these tables that we're going to make out of some square tubing. So let's say, okay, each table is going to take about 12 feet. Well, that would work out great. We just need someone else to make another one, So kind of start to think of this as it goes along. These pieces are sold. Go ahead and make a note too. Sold in, typically depending on the metal, it'll be 20 to 24 foot sections. Okay. So let's see, we got channel, we got pipe and tube, and we got bar. Let's see. Now this one is a lot like the pipe and tube, only it's solid. What do we call that? Anybody have a guess? Who said it over there? Alright, we got two of them. We got Rod. You're both right. Okay? This rod's basically solid tube. again, these are sold in, how we actually would measure these, when you see them on like plans for design, things like that, a lot of our ideas will come from a book, you know, just like a woodworking book. We have metalworking books up there too with different plans and ideas. It'll say, you know, for instance, we need, you know, 6 feet in the book. It'll say 2 pieces of 6-foot long, half-inch mild steel MS rod. Now, what do those numbers mean? Somebody want to explain that real quick? Come on, not too difficult. Do it. Go ahead.
2 pieces.
Yep.
6 feet.
Yes, so each piece is going to be 6 feet long. Yep. What's the half inch? That's the hard one I'm going to get at. This is how this rod is measured.
Oh, diameter.
Yep, say rod and pipe as well. The tube are measured by diameter. Okay? So that's how you would read that, and then mild steel rod, tell you what it is. Okay? So this is how this is measured. You make a little note. It's measured like this. So is the tube. The rod. Okay? That's how it's measured. Bar, like I explained before, bar is measured by the width, by the thickness. Right? Oh. Now, one last thing. Well, there's two more types. Let's see here. I got the channel written down. These ones will be kind of confusing at first, but once you write them down and once you study them, these are pretty important exam questions coming up. Now, these look pretty similar to one another. It's kind of hard for me to draw them separate, but there you go. Now, looking from the drawing, I really didn't draw it to scale, but what's different about these two types of metal? Thickness, right? Okay, so one, can you guess which one we would call a sheet and which one we would call a plate? Okay, so Cam was saying the bottom one's a sheet, right? Okay, Cam's correct. Why do you think that? Okay, so sheets are thin. I think of them as like, yeah, bed sheet, pretty darn thick, whereas like plate, like dinner plate, you know, that's pretty thick. So that's how you easily differentiate between the two. Okay, this one's a sheet. This one's plate. Now, what's the separation between sheet and plate? When does a sheet become, you know, sheets are sold in different gauges, different thicknesses, and plates are as well. What separates a plate from a sheet? Where do we make the distinction? Does anybody know or remember? Or have a guess? See a lot of people looking down all of a sudden. Anybody, you got a guess? Give me a number. Inch? A little thinner than that. About 1/8 of an inch. Okay? That's where we make the distinction. So, I'll just write in between. On the sheet, just write, you know, 1/8 inch and under. So less than 1/8 of an inch. Plate, greater than 1/8 of an inch. Now, when I mentioned sheets are typically sold in gauges, okay? What do you think of when you think of gauges? What do you think of, boss? You're kind of a hunter. Thinking like shotguns, stuff like that. Now, what's bigger in gauge? Is a 12 gauge bigger than a 410? Let's say. Yeah, by quite a bit, right? Or even like a 20 gauge. I think of like a 12 gauge and a 20 gauge. 20 gauge shell is a lot smaller than a 12 gauge, and that's how gauges work with metal. Okay, so for instance, on your exam, you're going to be asked a question, something similar to, you know, 24 gauge sheet of steel it'll be kind of a blank than a 14 gauge, right? So which one, what should the blank say here? Is 14 gauge bigger or smaller than a 24 gauge? Bigger. Okay, so it's bigger, so we're going to say it's thicker. Okay, that's how it goes. 24 gauge is actually thinner than 14 gauge. Sorry, I kind of asked it backwards. Okay. So the larger the number, really the thinner the sheet. Smaller the number, the thicker the sheet. Okay? That's how you remember that. Now there's one more type of steel that we use in here quite frequently. I kind of saved it for the end because it was important, okay? Hey, what do we call that thing? What do you got? Sorry, let's see. What do we call it, guys? What do you say? L? That was close, it's a good guess. We call it angle. Just call it angle iron. And the reason I'm saving it for the end, it's got a few advantages over the other types. Okay? Does anybody have a guess? You probably